The Angular CLI tool has set up a nice structure for us. It scaffolded a complete working project as we saw in the last section. Let's walk through the structure of this project and see exactly what we're working with. Here at the outermost level, we can see our Cloud9 project, which gave us some C9 project settings and a README file. Angular CLI set up a subdirectory called ng2-app, which we told it to do when we initialized our application with the Angular CLI tool. We told it to create the project named ng-app, which it did, and in the process set up a subdirectory called ng-app, which contains our whole project. At the project root level, we can see a Git folder, an end-to-end testing folder, a Node modules folder, which will hold everything that we add to the application with Node, and then our source files directory. All of the loose files at the project root are for the most part configuration files. We can see the Angular CLI.json file, which is a configuration file for the Angular CLI tool to use, so it stays within the bounds that we give it. There's also a karma.config.js file, which sets up different parameters for testing. There's our package.json file, which has all of our npm configuration and shows all of the packages that we're importing into the project. There's a protractor.configuration file, which gives us more testing configuration. And then there's a tslint.json file, which the build process uses to lint our application for us. If we go into the source directory, we'll see that we have an app folder, an assets folder, and an environment folder. And then at this source level, there are a number of other files. Our index.html file, which is the HTML file that our application runs within. We can see in the index.html file that was given to us from the Angular CLI scaffolding. Within the head section, there is a title for our application, a meta entry, which provides the viewport configuration, and a link for the favicon. Most importantly, in the body section, there's a tag for app root, and it says loading within the start and end app root tags, which we saw when we viewed our application in the browser. The browser showed loading ... as our application was loaded into the browser prior to it displaying. The main.ts file is used by Angular to set the application up when the application starts. It imports some key libraries to make the Angular application work, including Platform Browser Dynamic. That library is imported when an application is written specifically for a web browser. The last import is app module, which is the parent module for the whole application. We'll learn more about modules in an upcoming section of this course. We can toggle between a production or a development runtime environment, and then the last line is the actual bootstrapping of the application. The parameter passed on this .bootstrap module method is app module, which is the root module of our application. There are a number of other files for supporting our application within the browser, including polyfills, which provides backward compatibility in a browser. Our styles.css, obviously the styling of our application. tsconfig.json is an important file as it supports the TypeScript compiler, so it knows how to compile our application for the browser. If we go into the app directory, we'll see that our application scaffolding includes a number of app.dot files, including app.component.ts, app.component.html, and app.component.css. Near the end of the list, we'll see app.module.ts, which is the root module for our application. App.module.ts is a standard naming convention for the application's root module. We go into that file, we'll see browser module, ng module, forms module, and HTTP module are all imported. Browser module is a library that indicates we are building this project for the web. ng module is the library that supports modules themselves, and the forms and HTTP module are additional functionality of Angular. Should we use forms or make any HTTP calls, we'll have to have those libraries handy. The last import is app component, which is the root component of our application. It's the component that contains all of the other components that comprise our application itself. The app.component.ts file, app.component.html file, and app.component.css files make up this app component. Again, in app.module.ts, within the ng module decorator, we'll see a declarations section, which declares the app component. We'll see imports of browser module, forms module, and HTTP module. And this is the clearest example of how imports work in Angular 2. The imports at the top of the page, lines 1 through 6, are actually just references to these libraries. Within the ng module decorator, which is at ng module, we see an imports array, and this is actually where these libraries are imported into the application. within the decorator in the imports entry. It's an array of libraries that we are importing into the application at the application context level. The last entry in the ng module decorator is bootstrap, and this is used by the bootstrap process when the application starts to indicate which component within our application is the root component of the application. App component is listed here, and do note that the name app component is another standardized convention of Angular 2. The last line in the file exports the app module class and rounds out the app.module.ts file. If we look at the app.component.ts file, we'll see that our root application component imports the component library itself and then has a component decorator to provide the metadata of the component, which includes a selector, a template URL, and a styles URL. The selector entry indicates how the component is referenced in HTML. Think of it as a custom tag, if you will. The template URL is the HTML template of this component, so Angular 2 knows how to display this component. And of course, the styles URL is a reference to a CSS file, which styles that HTML template. And at the end of the file, the class is exported. Within the export statement, the title property is given a value, which we changed to our application. Within the app.component.html file, which is the template for our root component, it's simply an h1 tag, which displays the title property from the app.component.ts file, which we just discussed. The title property is injected into the template with the double mustache syntax and our title property within. Our app.component.css file contains nothing, but gives us the ability to style the app.component.html template as we see fit. If we look at this structure, we can easily see how all of these building blocks work together to bootstrap an application and get it running. If we go back to our project root source folder, we can see that index.html, which is the file that the browser interacts with directly, index.html is loaded in the browser, the metadata within the head is processed, and then the app root tag tells Angular to begin loading the application. The main.ts file is then referenced, and our supporting libraries are referenced in the main.ts file, and most importantly, the last line in this file begins the bootstrap process, which references the app module. So if we go into our source app subdirectory, where the app.module.ts file is, the next thing that happens in this bootstrap process is the app.module.ts file is processed, where a number of imports are referenced, including the app component, which at the end of the ng module decorator is the argument for the bootstrap entry, which then tells Angular to load the app component. And if we look at the app component.ts file, we'll see that the component metadata includes the selector, the template, and the CSS file. Also, the property title is populated, and the next step is to display the referenced HTML file, which is app.component.html, which brings us back to the index.html file, which will display the h1 heading with the title property value. At that point, the application is fully bootstrapped, the root component is displaying in the browser, and the application is ready to run any other logic that is triggered by user interaction. And this little tour has given us an understanding of what we're working with when we use the Angular CLI tool to scaffold a new application for us. We now know that immediately we have an application that can be run on the server, that we have a root module and a root component working and ready to support the development of the new application that we have in mind.